Hello everyone, I am Jack and I'm back. And I'm trying to decide what to call this, whether it's Shadetree Tools, Secrets, or just Shadetree Secrets, or what. But let me show you what I've got. So what it is that I have this mounting setup for the vents, for the hood. And I need to mount it to a surface. And unfortunately, the surface that it mounts to is parallel to this end and this end. So one of the things I could have done was extended this piece right here further down so that it matches, because the surface that it mounts to butts against is right here. So it won't mount this way. So what I would need to do is extend it to make it to where there's something to mount to. So I could extend it down here farther. It's hard to do with one hand. But anyway, down here farther, and then put screws into this surface and screw this to what it mounts to. A couple issues with that. One, if you look at how this is done, the seam is right there. Light's not very good here. There we go. The seam is right there. So the issue is, if I did that and you screwed the screws in here, it's going to put a force in, do that, there we go, this direction. That's going to try to tear that seam right there. And so I was planning on using panel bond adhesive, which is really strong. It's actually stronger than the base material, but that's not a good decision because that's going to put it in a bad way. So what I would need to do then is take this, cut this off, and then put it to where this surface is on top of here. And that way, when you screw it in, it's actually going to force the parts together instead of trying to tear them apart. That would work, except for the fact that this is carbon fiber with a foam center and carbon fiber on the other side, which makes it very stiff. I can't even bend this thing. But it's not very good at compression because in between these two surfaces is foam. So if you were to put a screw in here and tighten it down as tight as you can, it would crush this. So that's not a good way to do it. So then I had to find another way to do it. Well, then if you want something to put a screw through that you can't crush, metal. I tried to find thin steel at Home Depot because that's the closest place. I couldn't find any thin enough. 1/8 inch was the thinnest they had. And I could go thinner if I used sheet metal, but then I would only needed a thin piece, so I would have to cut a thin piece. My big metal shears aren't here. So I said, I don't want to do that. I can't do a nice cut. I've got hand shears, but I can't do a nice cut with that. So instead, I said, you know what? Let me try some aluminum. So I found this aluminum right here, 1/16 of an inch thick. Perfect. Thin enough to be thin and light, very lightweight. The steel was heavy comparatively. The only thing is, some aluminum is ductile, meaning you can bend it and it won't break. Others are hardened, and when you try to bend them, they crack. So I didn't know, I mean, it doesn't tell you, I don't think, what this is made out of, what series of aluminum it's made out of. So I thought I'd just try it and do it as an experiment. So let me show you the end result. The end result is this. So now what I can do is I can put this on here. Again, it's hard to do one-handed. I'm about to drop everything. There we go. Okay, so this is going to go like that. And so there's going to be a screw that goes into there. And I'm also going to put panel bond in there, but I'm also going to use a screw. And I'm going to use screws with locking nuts on them so that there's no chance of it vibrating and falling off. Not that it would hurt anything if it fell off, other than it would come off. But anyway, neither here nor there. All right, so that way I can actually even get rid of this end piece. I don't need it anymore. Its purpose was to space those two rails apart from each other. And by the same token, it doesn't have to be the exact width. I just looked at it and went, it looks about right for the width across this. And so the fact that it's a little bit bigger doesn't matter, as long as the two are the same or at least very similar. So when I say the two, I mean exactly that. I made a mirror image of that one. So if you look, and I put these back to back, you can see they are mirror images of each other. One goes on one end, one goes on the other. Okay. The next thing is, let's see. Oh, so to make this, I needed to cut right there. So I took the angle piece and cut a slot here and a slot here, and then bent that up. Normally I would use a vise and some soft jaws and all of that stuff, but I don't have all that stuff with me. So instead, I used a set of special vice grips, typically used for holding sheet metal, but in this case, I used the fact that it has this wide piece here and smooth jaws, clamped it onto the piece that stuck out. Let's see, do I have one that's cut? I thought I had one that's cut. Anyway, around here somewhere. Anyway, I've got one that's cut. And so then what I did was use that. Oh, there it is, right here. So I cut parallel to that, not exactly, but close to it. And then I'm going to bend that up. I'm going to put it to where the end of this vice grips is dead even with that line right there, and then I'm going to bend it up. The way I did the line was I put this against that and match. I'm matching. I made one, and then I'm using the same one over and over again as my template, and then matching every one that I make in the future with that. One of the things I didn't do with the first one was I did not drill a hole right there where the slot ends. The reason why that may be significant, would be significant in another case, is fatigue. If this part were under a lot of vibration, then it would be a concern that a crack would start here and it would perpetuate across there. The way you keep that from happening is you drill a hole. So if you notice on this one, I drilled a hole, very small hole, 1/16 of an inch, but because this is circular, there's no stress riser there. And same thing here. I haven't sawed this one yet, but I've drilled the hole right where it belongs, and then I'll use the saw to cut that slot, and it will stop right there. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, I could have used just plain old vice grips on that. The problem with it is they mar the surface because of the jaws, and you can put a piece of wood, like a paint stir stick or something, on each side and clamp that down, and it would make it to where it doesn't mar it. So if you don't have these special vice grips, you can use regular vice grips with little pieces of wood and do the same exact thing. To get this here, I aligned the edge of this with that line right there, and because of that drilled hole, it's going to naturally want to bend exactly there. When I did this one, because it didn't have the drilled hole, I had to kind of compensate and go, okay, if I start to bend it here, it's actually going to bend a little bit away from where the end of this is. And again, my goal was to make sure that it would bend without cracking, and you can see it bent a full 90 degrees and there are no cracks. Might be some stress there, but again, this is not under a huge amount of load. In order to cut this slot, there are a couple of options. Ideally, I would use my bandsaw, but my bandsaw is not here, so that was an option. If I use a bandsaw, it would take literally seconds to cut that slot. It's a 1-inch slot in a piece of 1/16 inch aluminum, and I can cut it very accurately. Don't have that. For that first one, I used my jigsaw, and it worked except for the blade broke. So now I can't use that. And it took, let's say, 30 seconds to cut. Reason 30 is I had to cut real slow. That's how the blade broke at the mount the first time, and so then I was able to remount it even though it was broken. And then the third time, I ended up having to grind down one of the stops, and I was able to use it. And then the fourth time, I had nothing else to do. So that would be great if I could use it again, and again, it would take about 30 seconds. The next option up would be my regular hacksaw. Problem with that is, I don't know what stupid thing is. Somewhere in the shop, I could have sworn it was on top of my workbench. It's not. I couldn't find it anywhere. But I was able to find this, which is a saw holder where you put a hacksaw blade in. Not the greatest, but it does work. It beats the other way is to wrap a piece of tape around and do that. So because I had this and found it, I went ahead and used it. It unfortunately takes several minutes to cut that slot. But again, that was optional. Oh, and I did try my rotary tool. Again, it worked, but it took a while to do, so I didn't like that idea. Plus, it throws chips at you. So even with safety glasses, I just don't like doing that stuff. I did try my vibrating cutter, but I couldn't hold everything solidly enough to come up with a good cut. It would cut, but it was not the easiest way. And because I'm sitting here working outside and it's warm, but there's a breeze, so it's actually not bad at all. Okay, so those are the different options of how to cut that. It's all time versus money. If you've got the money to buy, if you've got a bandsaw, of course that's the best, but most people don't have one. If you can get one of these jigsaws, but again, they're not cheap either. I priced them and they're not cheap. This one happens to be a scrolling one, which is even more expensive. But anyway, corded tools are a lot less expensive than the cordless ones, and you have to pick a battery option that you're going to use. Batteries don't typically interchange in between brands, so you've got to keep that in mind. Which goes to this, the drill. You can get a corded drill cheap. I just happen to have a cordless one, and I've got Ryobi. I've got Ryobi and Milwaukee and several other different tools, because I got them when they were on sale, and they basically are giving you the charger and the batteries for free. So I ended up with one of everything. So now when I see a tool on sale, it doesn't matter what brand it is, because I probably can already have a battery for it. The other thing is they make adapters that you can adapt batteries in between brands. So that's another option. I saw those. I haven't tried those, but it makes sense. All you need is a way to plug the battery into the tool. So you could plug an adapter in and then plug the battery into the adapter, and that'll solve the problem. Okay, so those are the things that you need. One of the other things is a set of drills. The better drills you get, the better off you're going to be. These are DeWalt. They're really good, but they're a bit pricey. You can get cheap drill bits from Harbor Freight. The difference is they don't last very long before they dull. Okay. Oh, and then to work on stuff, again, my vise is at the shop stand. So what I did was I've got these wheel chocks that I happen to have, and then this I used as a clamp, and that allows me to mount this to something so that I'm not holding it strictly in my hand and working. All right, so when you drill a hole, typically the drill will try to walk. It means you start to drill right where you think you want to drill, and then as the drill's going around, the drill bit starts moving around, and the end hole ends up not being where you want. Oh yeah, the other thing, markers. Lots of Sharpies. Harbor Freight has their version. They're cheap and they work good. So in order to keep it from walking, you really should center punch a hole. So if you look at this, there's a little divot right there. Now you can get a center punch with a hammer, or they make spring-loaded ones. They're great. Harbor Freight has them. They're cheap, but they don't last very long. I don't know why, but they just don't. So if you don't even have the money for that, or a Harbor Freight close to you, you can use a nail. Now in this case, I've never noticed this before, but if you look at this, the end of the nail, well, I sanded it down or whatever, but it's not round like you would think. It's punched, there's 4 sides to it. Not that that's a big deal, but also it wasn't very sharp. What can you do if you want to sharpen it and you don't have anything? Believe it or not, concrete. So what I did was I took this nail here, the concrete's real rough here. So if I want to do really rough sanding or grinding or whatever you want to call it, I can do that. Once I get to there, I can go to the next coarse concrete. You can see where I was scraping there. And then if I really wanted it to be smooth, I would do something like this. Now I bring that up because when I cut this with the hacksaw, the edge is a little bit rough and it's got a piece that sticks out right there. Well, I can do the same thing. I can take this piece of aluminum and rub it against the concrete here and get rid of that burr that's there. Same thing, there's burrs on the edge right here where the saw was. I can do the same thing. I can do this and do that. It's hard to get to that area right there. I need a sharper edge, but again, this is coarser, but it'll work. So I can do this and do that. And if you look, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have the burr anymore. And then I can go to this smooth one right here and smooth it out. Okay. And if you want to, you can use sandpaper, emery cloth, whatever, to get rid of those scratch marks. Or you could have done this from the start using sandpaper or emery cloth. But this is a little bit faster. Obviously, a set of files would be good. But again, good files are not cheap. Cheap files aren't good. So your choice there. All right. So you can see that taper that. They also make a deburr tool, which is absolutely awesome. You run it along the edge and it cuts off the burrs. Again, it's an extra tool. They're not expensive, but they are highly valuable. All right, let's go to the next thing. And the next thing I need to do is I need to drill that hole. So I have this is a 16th inch drill bit. You have to be really careful with these small drill bits. They're easy to break. And I mounted this, the only reason I mounted this is so that I could hold the camera in one hand while I drill in the other. The others, I actually just held both parts in my hand. Okay, so here's my drill. I've got it on low speed. So the rule of thumb is when you drill a small hole, you typically want to use a high speed and a low feed. Speed is of course there, low speed. Let me put it on high speed. That doesn't sound a whole lot different. But anyway, so I've got it on low speed on purpose, which is typically not appropriate for this, but I'll show you why I'm doing it this way. So the rule is with a small drill bit, you want high speed and low feed. Feed is how much pressure you're putting on it. So you don't want to push very hard because of course the drill bit's somewhat delicate and it's going to be easy to break. So this would typically be a high speed, low feed application. When you have a big hole, you want to use a low speed and a high feed, which means you set it on a lower speed and then you can put a lot more pressure on it when you're drilling. And that's the feed is the rate at which it goes, but that's directly set by how much pressure you put on it. The other thing is, if you're going to drill a big hole, believe it or not, it's faster to start with a small hole first as we'll call it a pilot. Drill a pilot hole, then go to the bigger drill bit. If you try to drill the big hole first, it really has a hard time starting. Now, aluminum's not bad, but steel, you're going to find out that one, it's going to take a lot longer overall than just doing 2 drill bits. And then you're going to dull the big drill bit faster. Okay, so what I want to show you is when you're drilling a hole, there is an optimum speed. And that optimum speed is where, we'll call it curlicues of the material come up. So if you're going too fast, it'll tend to make little bitty chips. And while that works, it's not the most efficient or effective way to drill a hole. So let me show you as I drill this. So there we go. Hard to watch the drill bit in this. Okay, so I'm going to drill. So I'm going to, whoops. Oh, my mounting didn't work so good. There we go. Now look, if you look at that close, there we go. See those little curly cues? That means that was actually drilling at the right speed, which is contrary to what the rule of thumb is, that this should be a high speed and low feed. I'm using, in this case, both a low speed and a low feed, but look at it, it's making those curly cues, which means it is going at the right speed. And you can see, look at that. It's drilling, even though it's going really slow, it is advancing very quickly through the material. Okay, now if I speed it up, see now it's making chips, not advancing as quickly. So let me slow it back down, and there you go. So the longer those curly cues are, the more accurately you are reaching the correct speed and feed. And so you can experiment. The other thing is, the faster you go, the more heat it generates and the faster it dulls the drill bit. Finally, another thing is you can spray it with some kind of lubricant. Any kind of lubricant will help. WD-40 works real well. Anything like that. I'm not using it because I'm going to paint a lot of things, and paint doesn't stick to anything that has lubricant on it. And so because this is so easy to do, there we go. All right, and then if you want to deburr this hole, almost every hole has a burr. If you look close, you can see there's a burr there. You can actually take one of the bigger drill bits, and again, I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch. This is just random. I could have picked any one of these. All right, and then I'm going to take it, and with my fingers, I don't need to use anything but that. And there we go. I just deburred that hole. So if you look now, there's a little bit of a taper right there. In fact, that's more taper than I needed, but that's okay. Same thing here. You can see I drilled that one. I can get it to focus. And I'll just put my drill bit right there. Spin it around. I'm using no pressure. On that one, I used too much pressure. This one, I used virtually no pressure. And that's all it took to deburr that hole. Okay, that's what I've got. I would show you bending this, but it's going to take 2 hands to bend that, and I don't have 3 hands. I don't have a 3rd hand to hold the camera. So that's what we got. All right, this ended up being longer than I thought, but this is how to do this with virtually minimal expense, minimal tools. You can see I'm not even in a shop. I'm sitting out here in the driveway underneath the eave, not even in the garage because the wind isn't getting in the garage, and I wanted to be in the breeze because it makes it the difference from a little bit stifling hot to at least tolerable. All right, like, subscribe, hit the alert, hit the thanks if you want to donate, and if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't know jack. Bye.